This is the best way to send any deliverable of any format to any client, whether it be a pack of ad creatives, a pack of copy for copywriting or funnels or whatever it may be. This is the exact way to do it. And I'm going to show you how to make it look so professional that every single one of your clients will look at what you've delivered and be incredibly impressed by it. I'm going to show you how I do it for my own agency, but the principles will basically carry over to whatever you're trying to do as well. So I have this automation that we're going to run, and we're going to run it from this form. So if I click create and run it, we'll see how it works. So the very first thing that's going to happen once this lands is it's going to do a bunch of things in Airtable. It's going to create a Google document for us from a template. Once that's been created, it's then going to do a bunch of things inside of Google Drive to actually share the document. Then we're generating some content for it in Claude based on a specific prompt that I have. We're going to then update the document with the information, and then we're going to update our own project management systems once the thing has been delivered. So what is the actual output? If I go into my Slack, I'll show you exactly how it looks. So this here is what the deliverable looks like. You can see it's got my logo on it. It's got the name, and it's got this interactive message that you can see with emojis and videos in tandem. So if I open up the document, it pops up with something that looks like this. And this document it's got the emoji or the favicon, sorry, of the client in question. It's got their contract, it's got the name of it, and it's got a bunch of information, including the overview and then some important considerations of the automation that's been built out. And then I say, hope this helps smooth everything over. If you haven't already, let's schedule a quick call to go over this in more detail and answer any questions you may have with a link to my Calendly. And the big thing here is really how it looks, how it's presented, and how easy it is to get around. And if you click here, you can see that this is the Loom video that is attached to it. Loom loves to do that the very first time. Let me just open it one more time again. If I click here, you'll see that this is the video, and it's just me explaining everything that is involved over here. Now, to build this, what I'm going to show you is basically how I actually got here, the reason as to why I needed it, and sort of the mental model or the reason as to why you need this for your business. And that mental model is called perception is reality. It actually doesn't matter how much work is being done in the business, as long as it looks like there is a lot of work being done a lot of the time. And now this is not going to call into consideration the standards that you hold for your business. You are obviously doing good work for people and delivering that work at a reasonable time. However, the presentation and the packaging of what you deliver matters incredibly. It matters so much more than you actually think that it does. And if you can get the presentation to give you those extra points and those extra bonus points whenever you need something to be delivered that you know a client's going to interact with, if you can deliver it in this way, you make such a better service, and you make the entire experience of working with you that much more professional. So let's break down all of the things that have happened. So this was a form which I created inside of Airtable. And this is client documentation for whenever I want to showcase something that we have built and implemented and turned on for their business. So the way that I work, particularly when you work with me, is we'll have a conversation about the things that we want to build. Once we've understood what those things are, I'll then create a plan. The people that work with me will build the actual automations and the systems. And then once those have been built, I then go in and I double check it. Once it's been double checked, I'll record a Loom video, walking through it, giving some important considerations and an overview as to how it works. And then I will fill in this form once I have that Loom video, and then I will add all the information that needs to be added. So what's actually in this form? I have the client name, I have the project for said client, I have the name of the document and the SOP's description, which is just a one sentence explainer, the Loom video link, and the Loom transcript. These two are present on Loom. The SOP description comes from the start of the Loom video as well. The document name is usually just the name of the project, or just an easy way for them to understand what it is, because this goes into their SOPs as well. And then I have the client information too. So if I go into the automation, let's break it down. The very first thing is this actually comes from, if I go over here into my automations, it comes from this. Now, almost all of my automations inside of Airtable where I need to speak to NAN, Make, or Claude code, or something that I've deployed on Modal, a webhook, an HTTP request, anything that I've done in order where I need to send some information off, almost always starts like this. There is a trigger of some form. The triggers can be whenever an Airtable record matches a specific condition, whenever a record is created, whenever a record is updated, or whenever a record enters a view, which usually just means a series of filters or conditions have been met. And as an aside, for anybody that doesn't know how Airtable works, Airtable really is just a system which is Google Sheets on steroids. It's just a really lightweight database, which looks a little bit like this on the back end. So you have a table here, which works the same way a spreadsheet does. And then you have columns that you can add, and these columns can be of different types, whether they be drop downs, they could be links to other tables, they could be URLs, they can be just straight single text, long text, or whatever it may be. And a lot of the times, whenever a record matches a certain or specific condition, it means that one of these drop downs has turned into something else. So if you have a drop down which is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and something changes one of those items to number 5, you can use that as a trigger for an automation to do something inside of make.com. So for us, that was simply whenever this form is submitted, which is create client docs, which is the form that I showed you at the start. From there, we run a script. This script is a basic JavaScript that I didn't make. I will always go here and I will just type in Airtable make webhook URL, and I'll find a specific community post which has the exact code that I want, which is called how to send data to a webhook URL. I've literally not even committed it to memory because I know that this has been here for years. And if I scroll down far enough, I will see this here. I believe it's even higher up the page. Yeah, this here. All I do here is I copy that. And then if I go here, I paste it. And the only things that I want to do is add what's called a configure or a config. It's basically just, this is me not actually knowing how this is meant to sound or meant to work. But all I know is that if I type record ID and then I click the plus sign here and then I click Airtable record ID and then I change what was in here, which is, record ID equals config my record. If I just change my record to record ID, it just works. So that's the reason why we get there. Again, I don't know how to code. You don't have to know how to code. This is the easiest way to send anything over to any automation or webhook that you want. And then I just copied over this with my actual make URL and it came up with this. So now we have a complete URL and all we're doing is we're sending a record ID, which equals the variable record ID, which is what pops up right over here when things launch. So now we're in make.com. This is the way that the thing actually works. So the trigger is always going to be something that we've managed inside of the automations in Airtable. We then run a script where we copy that code and we change over the URL so that we have the record ID of the form sent over to make.com. That is always the start, and that is always the way that this works. Now, I'm going to go back and tell you about something that I've harped on about so many times, which is called payload augmentation. The easiest way to understand payload augmentation is trigger, read, automate. Whenever you're doing anything, and you're doing some kind of automation where you don't want to have to make that automation multiple times for multiple different circumstances, if you have a trigger, and then you read certain things, whether it be rows inside of a spreadsheet, rows inside of your Superbase or any kind of like big database that you have, or an Airtable row, you can then grab all the information from that row, which gives you some stuff that you can then use to read other things. When you read a bunch of stuff, you'll collect a gigantic pool of data that you can then automate really, really effectively. So the way that that's worked in this automation is once I've got the record ID, I grab the form field. I grab the information from the record. So the way that this looks is this is the webhook. Then I have a get record step. So I just grab the record ID from that first step and I drag it here inside of the base and the table that this was filled in. Once I've done that, I then grab the client, which is linked inside of this form. So if you see here, this is what came out of the form. This is the document name. This is the description of the SOP. This is the linked loom. And then I have all of these, which are just arrays. And arrays is just a fancy way of saying just a list of code, but the list always has just one item in it. And the item that we have here is a record ID. And you can see that it's a record ID by REC, blah, 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 blah. Every single record or every single row inside of your Airtable is going to have a distinct ID. And this ID is what we want. We want IDs. We always want IDs, because IDs are what's going to allow us to do things in other places. So after we grab the form, we then grab the client that's associated, and now we get all of the information about the client. I'm not going to dox them, so I'm just going to do that there. Then we grab the company's URL. Now this here is us starting the automation part. And all we're doing here is we're running what's called a variable. Again, you don't actually need to be able to make this. You can literally just get Claude to make this for what you want. And all I wanted was the email ending. So if, for example, I have, Sheni at icarusgrowth.com, I just wanted icarusgrowth.com because I know that in a future step, when I want to share this with my client, I want to share this with anybody who has the domain icarusgrowth.com. In this case, it was your social currency, but yeah, that's what it was. I know that I'm going to need to find that somewhere, and I can find that by manipulating the data that I got when I did my read steps. So not only do you get more information in your data pool when you do trigger and then read before you automate, but you also get things that you can change into other things that you're going to need later down the line. And that's the reason why I got this from here. Then we have a router. This router isn't used to do any if statements. This is just separation of concerns. So it's going to go up here first, and then it's going to go down here second, because I wanted all of these steps to be done before I did any of these steps. So this is how it worked. The first thing I did was, after doing all of my triggers and my reads, I then did my first automation, which was to create a client doc. Now this doc is this template here. I have my icon here, project name, handover documentation, client name, client company, loom recording, and then I have an overview and then a considerations. So these here are all things that I am using make.com to replace with the information that I got from my read steps, because again, trigger, read, automate. The first thing that I read was the actual form fill. I just grabbed the document name, the client's full name, the company name, and the link to the loom recording. And then I grabbed this. So logo.dev is a place. This is kind of like an aside, but logo.dev is it's basically a free website where you can go and grab any URL for any logo that you want to find. So if I wanted, so you can see here, shopify.com has all of this information here. If I wanted google.com, it would give me this picture, and all I need to do is copy this URL into here. So all I did was I took the email ending, which is what I grabbed off of the end of my client's email. So it's like name@company.com. I grabbed company.com and I replaced, in this case, google.com with the merge field email ending to give me the client. Any client that I'm working with, this will be their logo. So that's the reason why I have that there. Then I have the title, and then I wanted to just put this into a specific location in my drive, and it's just the folder ID for all of the documentation that I have for all of my clients. And that's a folder that gets created inside of my onboarding flows whenever I bring somebody on who's new. And when these get made, it just means that I have one central hub that I can then give to them in their onboard during the process of me working with them. I have this as a Slack message at the top of every single channel. It just shows them where they can find all of their SOPs. I also put this inside of their own Airtables when I make Airtables for them. So after we created that document, we now want to add that document link to our form. So we just grab the web view link from the link to the document, and that just goes into this here. So we grabbed the information from the form, and then we just add the document link to it. And that's the reason why we have, if I go back into the data, it's the reason why we have this here, because the form fill has all of this, but it doesn't have any of these. So we grab the documents from there, and then we are good to go. Now, once we've done that, we then have a router which sends things in two different directions. The first thing we want to do is share this document down here with the company that we're working with. And it looks like this. We choose the drive, which is just, my drive. We select the fact that it's a file. The file ID is the document ID that we got from the Google step. And if I open up the Google step, because we reference that quite a lot, I'll show you that this is what comes out of it. So again, this may look kind of weird to look at, but all you need to remember is that we just need something that we can copy and then just put inside of the address bar to show us exactly what the output is. So we know that this is the link that we want to send. So we know that we're going to need to put that inside of our messaging and inside of anywhere else that we want to reference where this actual item is. Then there's like owners, download restrictions, and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm just like, all right, cool, I don't really care about that. That's fine. Then we need to go through the rest of this. And then we need to change it to these. So you can see here the role is writer, which means that this person is allowed to edit this information. So for example, if this goes to the operations manager, the operations manager can then go in, read or look at the Loom video and then put their own notes about who needs to do what based on how they're working on things. So it's just the ability for them to edit the document. Then we change the type from user or group to domain. And then anybody who has the email ending, i.e. company.com, as their email can then go off and look at this. So if james@company.com is the main point of contact and their operations manager is bianca@company.com, Bianca can log in to bianca.company.com and they can click on the button that comes out through Slack and then they can immediately take a look at everything. But james@companyb.com cannot look at that file because it's local to them. So that's what we've done there. And then we do probably the trickiest part of this all, which is sending that really pretty message over to the client. So what this is a block. So whenever I have normal messages, and I think I have an example of some normal messages here, we always fill in stuff inside of text. And you can see here that we have a bunch of information here, which is inside of the text block. However, what we've done is we have created a block. So if I go into the block kit builder for Slack, I'll show you what this is meant to look like. So if I just type in Slack block kit builder and then click here, it will take me to this here. Now, this is pretty much this is the place to make interactive messages of different kinds inside of Slack, but it's very codey and it can be a little bit annoying to play with. If I clear the blocks, it will just give me a blank situation here. But if I paste this information, it actually may or may not show me the message. So what I'm going to do is, because I have a bunch of stuff in here, text. Okay, so that pops up with what I'm looking for here. Now you can see that it's made up of a couple of different sections, and all I was doing was just dragging, markdown blocks and then changing the text inside of the code to change the block in and of itself, or different buttons or whatever it may be. This is where you go in order to make buttons and stuff as well with different messages. But the long and short of this is, if you want something very, very similar to what I made, just go into the templates and then play around with one of the templates. This is a good template to have, for example, this onboarding message. So I can use this message template. I can even delete this action because I don't need this action. And then you'll see inside of the code, wherever it says text, just change the text. The only thing you can't do is put in anything that's going to break the code. So don't put any speech marks in here, because if I type this, for example, it would just break it. It wouldn't show me anything. If I type in a bunch of forward slashes, sometimes it also doesn't break it, because this is a code format called JSON. And if you put in some stuff that may break things, then it sometimes doesn't work. But because, but you can just play around with the text and you can put whatever you want in here. This one here is, and again, you don't actually need to be able to make this. You genuinely can just take all of the stuff from an example or a template inside of the block kit builder and just feed it to Claude, feed it to NAN and say, I want this. I also want a button that's going to say this and this. Can you take what this template is and then just change it into what I want? And then it will give you exactly what you need. But this is how this stuff gets made. So all we did was we went in and we created this. We basically created all of this. if I get rid of this empty string bit, it will probably show me what I want to show. We just created it and we made it look like this. Click one of the buttons below to be taken either to the document or the video tutorial describing the build. And there's a specific way that you can tag people, and it's always the arrow brackets. So if I put arrow exclamation mark here, that shows me, that's like notifying anybody that's online. Arrow exclamation mark channel arrow, that gives me a channel notification. So anybody who's in the channel at all, at any point, they could be asleep or not asleep, gets a push notification on this. And then we just drag the document and the Loom video in, and all we did was we just copied all this information and then we pasted it into this block, and then we dragged from here all of the stuff that we were looking for. And that gave us this message, which looks like what we put inside of the channel, which looks like this. And you can see here, they can click on the document or click on the Loom video. This is really the nittiest grittiest part of this. And that is what we have when we're sending this type of message to people. Now, then we have a couple of really easy bits, which is just running an AI step to give us some information. And all we're doing here is we're taking the transcript and then we're just running a piece of content on the transcript. And that system prompt basically just says, you're a helpful SOP writer. Your SOPs are brief and helpful. Your task is to turn this Loom video transcript into an SOP. All I need is an overview and important considerations, talk in a conversational yet formal manner. You must output a JSON object in this format. Did I create this? I actually did create this one. I actually did draw this, but you don't need to be able to code in order to make this. If you're going to ask it to output a code, then you want to make sure that you say you must output an object or you must output JSON. And this sentence is almost always going to be super helpful for you, because there are going to be certain times where if you ask it to create the code that you want, it will give you some code that you don't need. And this code, or it will give you something that's just going to break in future steps. So only output the object, don't output I call them ticks. I don't know what the actual name of this is, but next to Z on your Mac, there's this here. I don't actually know exactly what that thing is called, but a lot of the times when you're doing this a couple of times by yourself, it will just put that in there and it's just going to be annoying to deal with. And sometimes it will do those three and then JSON, and sometimes it will end with those three in JSON as well. And that's just going to break things. So I just always tell it to remove it. And then I left all of these settings basically the exact same. I just left them alone. And the output was this. It gave me the content as a string, which looks like this. So you can see it says data, overview. This SOP covers the panda.contract completion process and the subsequent automated workflows. Once the client receives the contract, they sign it and click finish. This triggers an automation that creates necessary folders in Google Drive and Frame, sets up Slack channels and updates Airtable with newer client information. The system sends a notification to the onboarding channel with client details and links to the newly created resources. Considerations: 1, this; 2, this; 3, 4, 5, blah, 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 blah. Now this /n just means new line. And that's basically what's allowed us to have actual lists which look in somewhat of a good fashion. Now this here looks like, if I go into what make actually looks like, if I click content and then I click on text, it's just, this here is everything. So this gigantic bubble of code, which is what we got, comes out looking like this in the raw response. Now we don't want to use this. We actually want to parse this JSON. So we just add a parse JSON step for the raw response. I made this a long time ago, so they just added this to like the bundles and everything, but what I asked for, it actually gave me now. So you can see here, overview and considerations have actually been formatted in a way that I can click and drag them. That's all we're trying to do with this step here. We just want to click and drag things. Once we've done that, we then want to update the document that we've created, and we're just replacing text. So we want to replace the text in the document that we created, and that document is going to have the overview and the considerations steps. So you can see here, overview, considerations. That is what we have right there. And then we're just replacing that text. So where are we right now? What we've done so far is once the form inside of the interfaces, which you can see over here, has been filled out, this automation picks up the form's details and then sends it all to our webhook right here. This has now enabled us to do trigger, read, automate. And all we've done now is we've set up the trigger. After we set up the trigger, we then want to read the record that we got. Then we want to read the subsequent records that are attached to the one that we have to give us more information to play around with, because it starts off with just the record ID. Then we get the record ID and the information from the form. Then we get the record ID, the information from the form, and the client themselves. And from there, we have enough information to do what we need to do for our automations. So we had the trigger, we've now read the automation. Start off with grabbing the company's URL, where the start was this and the ending was this. We then create the document. After we've created the document, adding the logo and all the information about the client and the Loom video, etc. inside of the document. We then want to re-update our Airtable, share it with the client, send a message to the client, and then we want to add the rest of the information that's meant to go inside of this document, including the SOP information and other stuff that needs to go in, and then update that document so that that's ready for them to see. The final step is a really small step, and we come all the way back to our initial router where we wanted to do all of this. And then we say, we want to grab, again, we want to read something else, and then we want to automate again. So we want to read the project record that was attached to the form in the first place, which was this item over here. What project is this for? We then read that information, and then we move this project over to complete inside of our project management system. So what this has now enabled us to do is automate 95%, in fact 100% of everything that happens once something is done and we've recorded the video that needs to be recorded for it. So if you're fulfilling anything for anybody where there's some level of delivery and you need to be able to present it in a way and in a fashion that actually feels like a deliverable. So this is really important for people who do anything that's build and release. So for example, if you build 50 ad creatives for a specific client and you want to then present those ad creatives to somebody at the end of the sprint that you're running with them, you can create a form like that, which has a link to maybe Figma with all of the static ads, a link to a Google Drive with all of the video ads, and the document explaining the strategy behind everything that was created, and any landing page copy that needs to go alongside the creatives that you've made, which are going to be inside of the Facebook ads that are going to send people to the pages that you want them to play around with. If you want to create a document and have that deliverable be something that they can consume and keep and understand that this comes from you, creating something just like what I've shown is exactly how to do it. So to summarize, we have a form. This form gives us all of the information that we need, from who this person, who is this for, what is this actual project, what's the link to the Loom video, what is the transcript, what is the description, what are the other links that we need to deliver to this client. We then create an automation where once this form has been filled or submitted, we then run the script to send it to our automation to complete the trigger part of this entire automation. So that is the trigger. Then we read the information that was sent to that trigger, and then we read the information that we got back to get more information on top of that. So we read what came from the form. If we link the client, we read the client. If we link the project, we link the project. And if we have to read anything else that's connected to any of these two, we then read those so that we can do the subsequent steps. After we've done that, we then grab the company URL, or we grab the people that we need to actually share this with, and then we create the assets, we share the assets, we send the notifications to the clients, and then we update our own internal project management system. Now, this is only possible if you have your backend data in place. If you don't have your backend data in place, you need something like an Airtable, like what I've just shown you, or some sort of Supabase or relational database, or forgetting the complicated ways of describing it, you need Airtable in order to do this. So if you don't have one for your business and you want one to be made for your business, click the link in the description. You can see some other stuff. You can see how I've been able to do this for different people. And if you want one for yourself, you want me to build it, just click the link and I'll talk to you as well. But there's also some videos which you can find to do this for yourself if you're looking to do it in any way, shape or form. So have a good one. I'll see you on the next one.